we are right now on Animositas's channel, otherwise known as Annie. So this is going to be a super, super cool video where we basically run through everything that's just taken place during this land sale, how it's all gone. We're going to talk numbers. We're going to get into mega cities. We're going to talk about the tier 5 sales. When is the game coming? When can we play it? And so much more. So let's get right into that. First of all, how are you doing, Annie?
This has been a wild weekend. I think everyone that's on this stream right now knows the last 3 days have just been nuts. So much going on in Illuvium, and I think we've had really a great experience. And 3 or 4 days ago, that wasn't guaranteed. So just as far as a kickoff, I'd like to say it's really great opportunity to be sharing with you on here. And I think as a council member, you also deserve some extra credit for this, because over the last epoch, there really were some key IIPs that came through to actually launch the land sale itself. And so definitely from my chair and the rest of the community, thank you for the work that went in to get us to this point. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking through everything that's happened. So much to get to now and what's coming up in the next days for Illuvium.
Thank you. And I've got to say, like, if we're giving credit to anyone, we're giving credit to the Illuvium team. Obviously we were going to save this for a bit later, but I think let's actually start off with how smooth the sale went, how good the UI looks and feels. What have been sort of your feelings on that?
Absolutely. So I think there were 3 goals that I heard from the team, and that as a community member, as an investor, and as an eventual player of Illuvium, I was looking forward to. The first one was low gas, right? This was everyone's concern. You don't want to have FOMO kick in and everyone starts paying, $300 to try and front run people to get a plot of land. And it wasn't a guarantee that would be avoided, right? The most recent few land sales that have gone on had that problem exactly. And so number 1 was low gas. Number 2, I thought, was good price discovery. And number 3 overall was that user experience, that when you're searching for the plot of lands in the Illuvidex, you're able to see all of the contents and where are you going. You had enough time to actually get familiar with the interface, because we had a 3-day window. A lot of mint activities that go on in the NFT space, you end up having about 20 seconds to jump in, and then the bots are already sniping everything before you can get there. So I think those were the 3 goals, and from where I'm sitting, definitely mission accomplished in regards to all 3. What was your take on it?
I definitely agree that it couldn't have gone really any better in smoothness wise. It being a 3-day sale, like, so I know I heard some people that had a bit of doubt that were like, oh, because it's 3 days, people are just going to lose interest. But what we found instead is that, because almost like it would sort of every single batch, it would sort of trend towards these particular types of prices where people were buying at. What that gave people was 40 minutes, 50 minutes out of every hour to have a lot of time to do the research, to check things out, to put things in place, to prepare, and then to sort of make those buys that they want to, and really to get familiar with the UI, as you said. There were a few people that said, oh, like, we've had a few like transactions that like didn't go through. And honestly, like, that just happens so much more in other mints compared to this. And because the gas fees were so low, people maybe lost like $100 or like $200 at most on like lost gas fees that didn't even end up minting anything, when in like the other land sales, like, potentially you lost thousands and thousands, and imagine not even getting the mint. Like, that's just ridiculous. That's so much uncaptured value that doesn't even go back to the protocol and doesn't go back to its stakers. So I think it's been ridiculously smooth. What we've also seen in the very beginning was like a bunch of people coming in with ETH, and I think a lot of people have sort of doubted and said like, oh, like, what we actually saw was loads of people just coming in from outside, and they stopped coming, and it was just people from the Illuvium ecosystem that knew about SLV2. But what I actually saw happen was loads of people coming into the Illuvium Discord, doing the research and asking about SLV2, coming on the live streams, asking these questions. And I think that loads of newcomers learned a ton more about the Illuvium tokenomics, about SLV2, about our sales, and like, I think that's what it's all about. Like, a ton of people having plenty of time to really understand our protocol, and not just people from the Illuvium space jumping in on it.
That's right. I think the word that I would use was spectacle. And I use that word very intentionally because most NFT mints, especially lands, has been a spectacle in the sense of a train wreck type of spectacle. You're watching because you can't look away. Ethereum network is crashing. You got people front running each other, paying thousands for gas. Everyone's getting minted out. Bots are just immediately dropping everything onto the secondary market on OpenSea. This was a spectacle in the other direction because, as you saw, we had 24-hour live streams running in the Illuvium Discord. There were constantly people in the server itself on voice, sharing their screens, talking to each other about specific land plots, coordinating for megacities, and all of it was really focused on the game and the purchasing experience, not on how bad the infrastructure was. And when we look at it, one of the key kind of approaches that I thought about is, how did Illuvium do this differently than some of the other projects we've seen? And I've got it up on the board behind me for those that can see it. I used a 3-2-1 approach in how I envisioned Illuvium's actions here. So 3 was they used a 3-day window. And the big difference here compared to a lot of other projects is if you only have one single time period, everyone has to be there. It doesn't matter what time zone you're in. It doesn't matter if you're working or not. You're completely out of luck if you miss that window. And even, the projects that give a longer time window, it's usually a day or so, and then they'll open it up to public mints. In this case, you had a 3-day window that everyone was able to come in. It ran through the weekends, so there wasn't any stress or fear of not having an opportunity to get in because that constantly releasing batch process allowed you to have that opportunity. The second one was they used layer 2 solution in IMX. And this was, I thought, a really big change from also what we've seen other places. There's been a lot of discussion. We've seen it with the other side mints. Maybe ApeCoin needs to develop their own layer 2 solution. I think IMX as a partner did a splendid job here, and that wasn't guaranteed either. We've seen some projects where they needed to scale a bit in the past 6 months, but at this point, I can pretty confidently say for the scope of what Illuvium's done, this is working. Now, we're still going to have to see how they do when we get to main game launch. You're going to have thousands more NFTs that are being exchanged, but overall, very good experience. And then the one is there was one market price that was discovered. And I think anyone that would want to argue about that doesn't really have a leg to stand on. And what I'm going to do now is try and share my screen. When you look at the chart, and anyone that's been following the land sale for a while is going to recognize this. This is a pretty amazing story. As you can see, at the beginning of the sale, we had prices that were obviously higher for the floor for each tier, but pretty quickly, by the time you get to batch, 3, 4, 5, everything from tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 has leveled out. And it's basically going to stay within about a 15% window for the entire rest of the sale. The tier 4s dropped, and they were a little bit spikier, but really the numbers were so different for tier 4, you had a little bit more noise in the data. But everything really focused around that single price. And like the team has said, we were able to get true price discovery without having, secondary drops on the marketplace afterwards.
Yeah, 100%. Like, that graph couldn't look any more smooth, honestly. Like, it's actually what a lot of people predicted. They predicted there will be initial FOMO and just and then a slow decline. I think some of us were surprised just how quickly price discovery actually kicked in. It kicked in within 6 hours of the sale, where within the range that it ended up sort of sticking to. And then also it stayed so stable through all of day 2 and most of even day 3. And then it only really got that last minute FOMO in with SILV2 prices as well drop in, and that sort of changed the dynamics a little bit there. In literally the last 8 hours. So that was actually amazing to see. Super stable prices throughout. Let's go a little bit into the numbers of the land sale, how much was raised. So we can see right there the sales. So we had obviously tons and tons of plots, but overall we've raised $72 million and
240,000 SILV2, which is 67 million worth of SILV2 that was burned. and then about 4.1 thousand ETH. So about 7 million in direct ETH purchases. So about, let's call it 10% or 9% or so of the sale came out in ETH versus SILV2.
And what's the total number of ETH?
Just I think 239K. And so in total dollars, like you showed, we're approaching 75 million, which I think is incredibly strong. We're in the middle of a bear market, and people's liquidity isn't where it was. I can't tell you how many people I talked to in the week or two before that were looking at, what can I sell in order to get a little more liquidity? I want to buy some more SILV2 going into this. Yeah, so in the middle of Scoriox's stream, I think he was trying to squeeze out all the SILV2 that he could, and he was looking at every little NFT that he wasn't planning on holding for the long term. Where did he have 0.05 ETH sitting under the couch cushions that he could manage to put into Uniswap to get a swap in place before particular batch finished. So I think that really speaks to the value that a lot of people saw in the overall land sale itself, and the dollars that were accruing. I think it was lower, but again, we're in the middle of a bear market, and so people that are purchasing now, I think, have a lot of faith and belief in the Illuvium ecosystem.
Yeah, I think they definitely do. And what about your personal acquisitions? How many did you buy?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I went in thinking I was going to just buy like one tier 2, maybe another 1 or 2 tier 1s. I wasn't really sure entirely where prices were going to land. I'm also more focused on just ILV staking through the liquidity pool. So, but all that said, I'm a huge fan of base builder games. I played Clash of Clans for about 5 years. Absolutely loved it. This is a genre that really appeals to me, and so. I definitely knew I was going to get some lands. When I saw where prices were, running through the numbers, and I'll share some with our audience in a minute here, it felt like it was a pretty good deal from an ROI standpoint. And so I ended up getting 1 tier 3 and a couple tier 1s. The tier 1s are, let's say, conveniently situated next to a potential megacity. And so, in this case, I actually found 2 that were dropping in the same hour of the sale, that were, right in a particularly important spot for someone. And so I grabbed both of them. I'll play them if that person doesn't want them. I didn't pay a super huge premium. And from a zone standpoint, I've got one in Shard Bluff, which is my tier 3. And that's the one that I'm going to be maining probably for the next decade. As long as Illuvium Zero is running, I'll be playing that thing. And then the 2 tier 1s are in Taiga Boreal. So really excited with where I landed. What about you?
Well, I started off and I was like, either I don't buy land, maybe I buy a tier 1. You know what? I want to buy a tier 1. That was because I want to own a piece of Illuvium. I also now currently have 1 tier 3, also in Shard Bluff, as it happens, and 2 tier 1s, 1 in Taiga Boreal and 1 in Crystal Shores. So I also got a lot. I also didn't expect the prices to go this low. I was looking at it and I was like, maybe I've got enough for a tier 2, but I'm just gonna buy a tier 1. And it's like, oh wait a minute, I could buy a tier 3, and then it's like, actually, this is a great deal. I want a tier 3. I paid like 30 SILV for my tier 3. I know it went a little bit lower after that, but the moment I bought it, I was like, I just want to buy it. I don't care if prices end up lower after. I was like, I just want to secure this and not stress. And I was watching some of the people that still had buys to do on day 3, and I was like, I was just sitting back, relaxing. It was so much more relaxing to get your buys done sooner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'll tell you what I mentioned a few minutes ago. I'm going to pull up a screen and just share from a calculation standpoint. So those of you that have seen Scoriox's videos, he's got some really good calculations. The really interesting thing for me in this whole process was what's essentially the payback of when I'm going to recover the initial cost of the land that I put in, right? And so a lot of that's unknowable. We don't know what blueprints are going to be valued at, and there's obviously a huge element of chance as to what you might get. So this calculation that I've got, it really doesn't take any of that into account. This is purely a fuel-based payback calculation. And so what I note is down here at the bottom, you as the audience member can evaluate what you think is the appropriate amount of revenue that Illuvium is going to generate in a certain time period. And wherever you think we land on this chart, when you come over here to the right-hand side, I've just taken the overall average cost for each of the tiers of lands that went for in the sale. And so you can see the tier 1, the average price was about $1,000 US. Tier 2 was $2,800, Tier 3 was $8,700, and Tier 4 was $3,200. And this is, of course, in Ethereum. This isn't the SILV2 price, to keep it simple. When you look at those two values on the chart here, you can see that depending on where we land on, the $2 billion, $1 billion, $500 million, $250 million in revenue, this is the payback time that we're going to see from the land itself. And so, if you're in the camp that thinks we're going to have a pretty light launch, you're probably looking at a 4 to 5 year payback on your investment. But if you think about it, that's really 20-25% ROI, which where stock markets are today, where crypto is today, that's actually a pretty good deal. And from there, things just get more bullish if you assume that Illuvium is going to have even a stronger launch than that. So I thought this would be interesting to our audience. These are the numbers that I was looking at when I considered, what strike prices I might be willing to pay for a given tier of lands.
So keep that on the board. Keep that on the board for now. I've been running very similar calculations, inserting a few different werevenues that maybe Illuvium's earning, and it's actually so. A lot of us coming into Illuvium, we're aware of Axie. We've seen Axie's success and demise. Obviously, can they make a comeback? That's another question. But
that's right.
Point being, we've all come here because we don't believe that Illuvium can be another Axie Infinity. We believe that Illuvium can be miles beyond anything that Axie has ever achieved. And part of that is just if we analyze just the biggest monthly revenue that Axie Infinity ever received, that was $300 million. And if we have $300 million per month revenue in Illuvium, within just people buying the fuel for traveling, for crafting shards, and for crafting weapons, armors, and skins, all of which are just huge things that will be within the game. That $300 million, if that's happening monthly, then on average, the average person that's invested is going to actually see a complete 100% return on their investment within literally 3 to 6 months.
3 months, yeah. 3 months with what we saw in the prices for this first sale.
Yeah, which is insane. Which is insane. Obviously, one of the things that you can see from the calculations you've done, based entirely on the average cost of each tier, is that each tier is about 3 times more expensive than the previous tier.
That's right.
But always slightly less than 3 times more expensive. Although tier 2 and tier 3 look about very similar, but a tier 2 actually ends up being cheaper than 3 times a tier 1, but it actually does produce 3 times. So technically, the higher the tier you have, the quicker you get back your ROI. But that just kind of makes sense because that's just generally the case in most such investments, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And certainly, we'll see with the future timing of land sales. Obviously, this is the first batch, and so we're going to have 4 more. So this is, 20% of what we'll see launched. But if you view this as a long-term investment, which is how I'm approaching it, I don't think that's a particular concern. This is one where if you get it paid back within the first year or two, after that, everything's great. And honestly, I expect I'm going to want to be playing the game anyways, and I would play it for free. And that's really the exciting part about this whole space is with Illuvium, you don't have to pay me to play the game. That's very different than a lot of play to earn games. This is a play and earn or a play to own concept. And so really, I'd be playing anyways. If I can pay money and then get ROI out of the deal, even better. So one other disclaimer we should make for sure, everyone watching, this is not financial advice. These numbers are to just give you some sense of where things are positioned after this first land sale. Do your own research, make your own decisions. But from my chair, this turned out to be very successful from a cost standpoint as a potential gamer and investor.
And I also want to say that on me putting out Axie's 300 million out there, I'm by no means saying that within like a game launch, the first month, that's where we're at. Because, you know, it's going to take ramping up. It's going to take adoption. There's always an adoption curve with anything. Axie took like over a year, I believe, to
That's
actually
right.
ramp
Yeah,
up
it
to
was a
that
year.
point. So, like, but point being, if you believe in, as you said, Illuvium's long-term success, then Land is pretty much a no-brainer, and especially at the prices it sold, I've kind of got the feeling that whoever bought Land, it's almost like a bit of a gift, and they're not gonna do any future land sales until we make some decent ROI and already from this land. Otherwise, they'd just be hurting their like early supporters, which Illuvium does not want to do.
That's right, and I think as you see more gamers enter the space after the game launches, eventually you're going to hit a point where it makes sense. Many more of them that have no knowledge of Illuvium right now are going to want to enter to be able to play, and for sure, you've got a secondary market that's out there. One other interesting thing, and we can talk about this. You didn't see dumping on the secondary market afterwards. Basically, the prices in Ethereum are still what they were 24 hours ago. That's very, very different than most NFT sales as well. You usually see some immediate dumping. You saw some drops where people were arbitraging from SILV2 to Ethereum, but in general, everything's basically stayed stable. And I think that points to the fact that the actual price discovery mechanism did work.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it also speaks to the fact that like some of us theorize that there's going to be a bunch of people that are just trying to like liquidate their SILV through Land, right? And get some liquidity by flipping it for ETH. And we have definitely seen some of that, which was actually a positive thing for those coming in that weren't willing to spend SILV, that wanted to just buy with ETH, because they could actually buy on the secondary market for cheaper in ETH price, even if you were buying in SILV2, the cheapest way was actually through the auction, right? So it's been the other thing that I didn't expect. I did not expect this. It completely shocked me. I was like, it's just Land. I'll bet maybe buy a tier 1. And then now that I've bought my tier 3, like since like it was minted and I've seen it, and like honestly, I formed an attachment to it that I did not expect.
Right.
I really care about this NFT in a way that I haven't cared about any NFTs that I've previously held. And that for me is like, I don't think I'm the only one here.
I think the Pokemon example is the best, right? When you're playing Pokemon, whenever you choose your first starter, right? Whether you're someone who wants a Charmander or a Squirtle or a Bulbasaur, it doesn't really matter. Whatever your first Pokemon is, you get a real strong attachment to that character. If you have a game that has good IP and it's got lore, it's got engaging and interesting characters, that creates that emotional attachment, and that's what you want as a game studio, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a collectible game, or it's even a first-person shooter game. You want to feel an attachment to your character, your avatar, your items, your equipment, your lands. If you have that, you have a propensity to be able to just leverage that for the future, and people are going to want to stay in that environment. And when you add on top of that actual ownership, the question is, are people going to be willing to actually sell their NFTs here, right? That's actually a problem that has never been asked when it comes to other games that are in the Web3 space, because you just assume everyone's only there to try and flip or get more tokens or whatever it is from a pay-to-earn mechanic. In this case, people are going to demand quite a lot of money to sell some of these items that they're going to get really attached to over time, which I think is the way that it should be.
I think that's the way that you'd always want it to be, because like, especially in like a World of Warcraft or any of these games that you play, you collect all this stuff and you actually have a bond with it because you've got a journey with it. And then when it comes to like Axie, it's just something that you bought from the market. Maybe you like bred it, but like you don't see the process. You're not engaged in a like serious like world and storyline, right? Maybe you really find that Axie cute, and there is some cuteness to Axies. I'm not gonna like deny that. I've owned Axies, but this just feels like an actual Pokemon and an actual. And I want to reiterate that we use Pokemon purely as an example because Illuvium something new, but I look forward to, like, years down the line, people using Illuvium as an example, because
That's right.
it's actually something totally different and new and on another scale altogether.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So one of the topics I'm curious about, you mentioned you've got your tier 3. Are you in the middle of a, like a populated area where all of the adjacent tiles were filled in next to you?
So maybe let me quickly just check.
Okay.
So I'm actually near the edge on it, but I personally, when it came to doing it, I wasn't trying to snipe anyone. I wasn't trying to get in anyone's way. I just wanted a single plot of land. I didn't even care what like region it was in, because I was like, whichever region it is, I'm happy to be in Illuvium, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason I ask, I think that the megacities concept is really interesting, right? And you've got some people that they're still going to have an opportunity to build towards a megacity in the second land sale because they might be on the edge of an area today. That was one of the reasons why when I went after those tier 1s, I actually want someone to be able to build a megacity. I'm not trying to run someone out and charge them 5 times market value for it. Basically, for me, it was if you can buy a couple, put them up for sale at a small premium, that person's going to be able to buy it. You arbitrage the SILV2, and you're able to have someone get a megacity. Because I saw early on, people were basically just getting locked out of it. That's the one thing that I would like to, to see maybe in a second, third land sale, is some way to allow people a chance to, maybe you can put an early bid on one. If you're an adjacent plot and you say, look, I want to purchase the one immediately next to me to have a chance at the megacities, that I think would be an interesting mechanic. You'd still want that person, maybe they have to pay, initial market value or something, but because I think that mechanic is one that everyone really is looking forward to, and I didn't see too many people be successful at it. I think I saw 2 people that had a 3x3 megacity they'd been able to unlock. I'm not sure if you saw anything different from the channels that you were in or not.
So I've at this point probably witnessed at least 5 megacities, just from different people. They are all whales, and I've also witnessed whales who had like over 1,000 SILV to start with that gave up. They literally gave up along the way because they kept getting sniped, and they were like, you know what, like I'm just gonna give up. And what I've also found is like some of those whales, like they get sniped and then they actually just lose interest in that particular megacity. They just move on. So I'm not sure how much of a premium they're actually willing to pay. Although I'm sure that time will come, and I do want to see offers being able to be made on a plot of land so that they can put in an offer, not just wait for that person to want to sell it at a price that they're happy with. But I think the megacities concept is very, very cool, and I do like the entire aspect of that. I'm just not well enough, bro. I'm just not well enough to
me neither. And the point that I think is when you look at the value of having a megacity, right? This is the calculation that I think a lot of folks that were going for it are making. It looks to be somewhere between maybe 10 to 25% more valuable, depending on what landmarks you get, depending on what tiers you have. Of course, that's a broad range, but it doesn't appear to be the fact that having a megacity is going to give you 3 times the value of the other land plots. It just doesn't scale that well. And so I think if that was the case, you'd see people a lot more interested. If you got to double or triple your production output from everything else in the megacity, that would be different. But in this case, most people are looking at it and saying, well, for an additional 10%, I'm not going to pay 80% more from a market value standpoint for that plot of land just to have a megacity. So I think it probably was a good decision for most people that were considering it. But I do hope that over time, more people, if that's something they're interested in, they're able to collect some. You'll see a good secondary market emerge over time, and people can try and fill in their holes where they had some.
No, I totally agree. And the other thing that I also like about it only being like up to like maybe 25% just more efficient overall for that entire megacity is that it also protects the little guy, because some people had big concerns of like, well, what if all the whales just make megacities? Like, where is the resources that they're getting coming from, right? Because all landowners, they only get 5% of all of the fuel produced within the Illuvium ecosystem. So there isn't new fuel being given to those megacity owners. They're actually extracting it technically from the total. So if it's only like a 25% advantage based on the total amount of megacities that there will be, because megacities isn't the average. It's actually a niche thing.
Yeah,
Not
that's right.
everyone has a megacity. It's actually very hard to put a megacity together. But once you do, if you've only got like 25% edge, what you're actually taking away from like everyone that's just got a single plot, like it averages right out, smooths right out, and then maybe like me with a single plot, working on that plot, maybe I'm like 1%, 2% disadvantaged, if even that, right? So it doesn't hurt the little guy, whilst giving an advantage to those willing to put in that extra effort and put in that extra money to gather a megacity. The other beautiful thing of a megacity is some people have found lands that are like tier 3s and 4s that they've been really disappointed by, which I don't think are too disappointing, because even the worst combination isn't that bad. But like maybe having a landmark with like no corresponding element or fuel that they're somewhat disappointed by. But if you form a megacity around that tier 4 or 3, then what ends up happening is you can still use that landmarks bonus on all those other plots around it, and it almost like completely like negates the misfortune of that initial plot.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, and I think the interesting thing from the landmark standpoint is the mechanic isn't only improve the overall productivity of that particular fuel or resource. It also gives you a 10% bonus if you're having to swap to trade to get that additional resource that you're missing. So even if you're in a situation where you say, hey, I've got a particular landmark that's going to help me with silicon, but I don't have any silicon generation on my plot, it's okay. You're going to get 10% bonus to swap to it. And so that I think is a really nice feature that it doesn't feel as bad
balances,
even if you got an unlucky roll, from the the plot layout. Certainly, you'd rather have a full, fully loaded set where I think Kieran linked he had 4 or 5 Solons in one of his tier 4s with the Solon landmark, and good on you if you're able to get that. But at the end of the day, maybe that's 5% more efficient or 10% than someone who got a terrible roll. But at the end, it's still going to be, I think, one where people aren't disappointed, and a lot of times that's not the case for NFT mints as well. Sometimes you get what you get, and you look at it and you're like, man, I just want to sell this thing at the floor immediately. But I don't think that's really the case here for too many people.
I really don't think anyone needs to be selling that floor just because it's a bad combo. And I've tweeted this out a good bit because I've seen a lot of disappointed people that I don't feel should be disappointed. And what I basically said is, Aaron really hasn't been that cruel with this RNG. Like, wait for Illuvium to come along, because that's going to have some brutal RNG. Because over there, you can buy a 2 ETH box that, like, you just get bad luck, and it's a tier 1 alluvial that's worth like 0.05 ETH. That's a loss. Now there, feel free to be disappointed and cry. You probably should. But
that's right.
Also, you buy it and maybe it's worth 6 ETH because it's a tier 5. Because there's no just guaranteed tier 5 Illuvitar. Like, you actually have to lucky dip on that one.
Yeah. I think for sure you're gonna see that be the more degen type of play where people are like, okay, I'm going to take my shot here and see what I get. Or you're going to see people that they're coming from a gaming space where they're really focused on cosmetics. They really want that PFP flex. And, they want to be the only person in the world with that particular Ramfire that's got, the cool sunglasses or whatever. I think that'll be the space where you're going to see a lot more variability in what people are willing to spend, right? And it's the polar opposite of the land sale here, where basically everyone converged on, kind of market prices and value that people are assuming they're going to get from the fuel sales, the value of being able to play the game, with meaningful dollars behind it. The Illuvitars is going to be completely the other direction. And so I'm really excited to see when that launches. I assume even if you did have some insider knowledge, you wouldn't be able to share it. But if you do have some alpha and want to share it today, that'd be great. But I'm really looking forward to that being the next major drop.
I mean, honestly, I think most of the information when it comes to Illuvitars is actually just public. I don't have any insider knowledge. But what I'm very, very excited about is the fact that this is actually NFT profile pictures, which is like, whatever. But actually at a level of quality that is actually far and above literally any NFT project currently out there. The amount of they've got their own team within the Illuvium team that literally have just focused on these. They've already said that they've completed not just the first batch, not just the second batch, but by the time the sale rolls around, they'll have all 3 of the first batches. So the entire set of like Genesis Illuvatars already ready, and they're considering banging all of those out in maybe like 3 separate 3-day sales or 1-week sales to just generate a ton of hype, and also to give it that extra scarcity of time, not necessarily the scarcity of amount, because obviously you can buy as many of those as you want. But the other thing that's super cool is you buy your like base layer Illuvatar, and then you also get given different like sunglasses, maybe a chain, but those are all separate, and you choose which Illuvatar you attach it to, and the amount of combinations that are possible, I think they're like 1 million or something. So genuinely, if you make yourself your own Illuvatar that really matches your style, it's very unlikely anyone else is going to have exactly that Illuvatar. And I definitely think for that reason also, we're going to see a ton of attachment to those NFTs too, because you've literally made your own NFT, because you could buy it as like a bunch, and then pick the base layer that you like the most. Pick the sunglasses or eyewear that you like the most. Get the chain you want. Whatever you want. Maybe you like a cigar in the mouth. So I think that's super, super cool on that level of like customizability and also that gacha aspect. I know that Vulcan was like, I don't really care about land. He said that he doesn't really even like the type of game, that he's not too interested in it. But what he did, what made him want to play is the fact that when you buy it, you get the random distribution of elements and
That's right.
That is a super amplified when it comes to the Illuvatars.
It is, yeah. He was on Square X's stream with me when he shared that, and I was just like, man, this is straight degen, but I love it. This is the cool part about the project is if you want to go fully, off the deep end, especially with the Illuvatars, and you want to just absolutely wail on them and hope that you get, the massive perfect combination, go for it. From an administrative standpoint and operational side, what I would say is I hope that we see the same type of approach used for the Illuvatars that we saw for the land sale. So, I talked about that 3-2-1 concept. I think the 3-day window makes so much sense, having just gone through the land sale here. It gives you an opportunity to jump in, but it's not going to drag on for months and months and months, right? So I can only imagine the streams that we're going to be having when people say, look, if you want to go and buy your Illuvatars on stream with us live, we'll go ahead and broadcast this thing, and we'll see what you got, right? And, if you end up getting, whatever is your least favorite of all of the Illuvatars on the way, and you end up spending 2 ETH, that's going to be a painful situation, but it's going to make for absolutely great YouTube content. So, I think there's some value for us personally in it. But I also think, if we can keep using, the layer 2 with IMX, it's going to be a perfect approach. The point I would make is that the 1 I think is not going to be relevant because you're not going to have a single market price that you can discover. This is going to be very different when it comes to the Illuvatars compared to the land sale.
Yeah, because it's not a Dutch auction. There's just set prices for the different boxes. One thing I personally would actually prefer that each batch is like for a week rather than 3 days, just because at the start of those 3 days, I buy one, and then I'm like, oh shit, I'm out of money. And then I'm scrounging to get liquidity, and I want to have a few days to scrounge. I don't want to have no time at all. And then on to the next batch, and oh my God, I need to scrounge for that one as well now. So
what you're saying is we need to find a 3-day window that goes over like a Friday for payday and like the 15th of the month or something where, everyone is going to get a payday in the middle so that they can quickly move money to their wallet to ape in a little bit further, right?
And maybe even have a bit of space in between them so that people actually get a chance to claim some more SLV, get some more ETH on hand, all of that, just to get ready for that. I know that for me, they've said that Illuvatars is July. This entire month is the quest to scrounge for as much liquidity, to buy as much SLV2 as possible, to hit those Illuvatars hard.
That's right. And I think this is one of the interesting things that we saw too. A lot of people were predicting, an absolutely hard SILV2 dump after the land sale finished. And it did a little bit, But as we're sitting here right now, we're about
$95.
12 hours after the land sale ended at the time of recording. It's only dropped about 40% from where it was about a day ago in the middle of the land sale, right at the peak. And so, I think that's actually pretty strong sentiment that maybe everyone's just buying it up as soon as it drops further. I honestly, in full disclosure, I did pick up some more SILV2 this morning at a very good price on the secondary market. Not financial advice, but I think that for me is where I'm going to focus for the Illuvitar sale. The PFP is not my pure favorite approach, but I will be getting at least one or two. I may take the least risky approach and get something off the secondary market that I like if I see something at a good price point. But in general, I think we've seen some pretty solid stability within the SILV2 price table.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm now looking at it, and I'm like, you know what? I think when we finish this interview, I'm gonna buy.
You're gonna buy some on stream here with us?
Nah, not on stream, because I need to buy it on like crypto.com. Send it through and all that. But I think I'll get some.
Absolutely.
It's just too good at this damn price.
Yeah.
How could you say no?
So let's talk about the other option that you've got here in the next few weeks, we hope, which is Tier 5. And I know big time whale here, Vet. You going for a Tier 5 land plot when they come out?
No, I'm going for both of them. I would like to have both.
Good.
One isn't enough for somebody like me. I got to have it all. But in all seriousness, I think it's got to be like guilds or like big organizations that can really afford to put this together. Unless I'm just mad fat whale, it just goes for it and just wants it all for themselves. Which honestly, I would big time respect if they can manage that.
Absolutely. I think that if you have someone that does that, my hope is that they put it to good use, though, right? The advantage is you've got the arena. There's going to be huge demand for people watching the auto battlers. I think if we look back to when Kieran and Grant did the stream, $1 million battle, that wasn't even set in the entire structure. We were still in the very early days of the beta. When you've got a fully fleshed game out there and you've got people that, you've got the Leviathan arena rocking and people have been purchasing everything they can off of the secondary market to build their best meta squads, that's going to be absolutely wild. So I certainly hope this is going to be a good sale for the Tier 5s. I know there were some technical issues that delayed the launch of them, but I think this may actually end up being a better outcome than what was originally planned, because the Tier 5s would have been an exciting way to kick it off. But now you've got all of those guilds and the VCs and the organizations that are looking at this and saying, okay, we've now seen $75 million worth of sales in the middle of a bear market for lands. There's real demand here, right? And so even if you're in a spot where you're saying this isn't maybe the best time for me to want to buy based on market conditions, you've got an opportunity here where you can be one of the very first two groups or individuals to own the Tier 5s for the next 6, 9, 12 months until we have the next land sale. There's a lot of potential just having that early first mover advantage.
I definitely agree, and whoever manages to pick it up, GG, well played, because I think there'll be, even if they're like 10 mil, I think they're a bargain, just because like all those future Tier 5s, they're going to be after the success of the game. The game's starting to succeed, things are going great, and like, I don't know, maybe we see $100 million, like that, an NFT sale hasn't happened at that price yet, but maybe it does, and maybe it does because we're generating so much revenue, and that those arena lands would generate so much revenue that maybe it's worthwhile. And I don't think anyone buying a Tier 5 is buying to flip. That's not a buy to flip. That's a buy and hold for the end till the end of days, till the horsemen of the apocalypse come. So
yes.
And then on to just like, when is the actual game coming? We've bought our lands now. When do we get to play? I think the team have said that it's going to be in about 4 weeks. That's just based on like Discord chat. Is that what you've heard?
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. I've seen a few people, some of the community managers, some of the dev team have indicated it's in the full alpha version right now with the team. So not public alpha, but internal private alpha that's in progress today. I've talked with a few folks that have been playing it, and I think it seems to be in really good order. The main change that delayed it slightly was Grant took one look at the graphics and said, we've got to make this the absolute best city builder game in existence from a graphical standpoint. And so I know they had to make some changes over the past few weeks to improve that. It looks amazing. Anyone that's if you haven't been on Twitter,
past months,
yeah, you haven't seen the land itself. It's absolutely lit. The one I'm a little disappointed. I haven't seen Shard Bluff's in-game land visuals yet, so hopefully that comes out on Twitter. I think I've seen every other region at this point, and given that I'm going to be in Shard Bluff, I'm personally invested in seeing that as quickly as possible. But I cannot wait. I think it's going to be awesome.
I think it's going to be dope, and all the leaks of it so far are just stunning, like absolutely stunning. Also, those leaks of actually seeing some of those buildings from like a first person point of view and like looking up at them, and maybe like one day being able to like from the main game overworld sort of being able to just go into your own land and just walk around it and have a look at it from like the inside, not just from like manager's bird's eye view point of view. I think that's also very cool, just because that little view, that little glimpse from first person really showed the degree of like size of the buildings that we're actually talking here. Because when you usually see it, you're like, oh, it's these tiny little buildings. But actually they're huge monuments, and there's a lot of detail to them. And the fact that they can scale them to look that good in that scale and size means that when you're looking at them and they're tiny, like they're just so much detail is just crunched down into those small like things that we can see within the game. It's just very attention to detail, which we absolutely love about Illuvium.
That's right. And I think the potential is really exciting from a next steps with the Illuvium land as well, right? So I've been in several conversations on stream and in different Discord chats over the past couple weeks, what could come next, right? So we know the first person, player capabilities of the base builder. Could you have a co-op game? Could you have a competitive game where you're attacking other people's bases? The open world exploratory environment. And one of the things that we heard on stream that I thought was pretty interesting. Anyone that's seen the land plots themselves knows that in every region there's the obelisk, which is there's 7 individual landmarks that are spread throughout the world. Around those, there's a region that has no land plots in every single one of the 7 regions. And so, from a future standpoint, the expectation is for now, that's going to be the part of the overworld that you're actually traveling around. But when you get beyond that and we're able to open up the rest of the game and you can go to actual players' land plots, there's really no limit to the mechanics that you could introduce in that type of a setting. So I think you've got an exciting first start where you've got kind of the minimum viable product that the team is going to be putting out here, but you've got a lot of potential for the years to come to develop it further.
Yeah, 100%. And on to just like the performance of IMX. We've already covered that, but do you want to speak on that further?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key points that as investors and gamers, we're not as focused on the foundational elements and kind of the ecosystem that needs to be built up to allow gaming. And when you think about the success that Axie has had, one of the big topics that's been a major discussion point is like the Ronin Bridge. And, they had to do a lot of work to develop to get to the point where they actually could have a functional product on the blockchain, because the blockchain in general has not been able to scale as well as we would like for use cases like gaming. Now you're starting to see new layer 1s, layer 2s on Ethereum like IMX that are emerging. And the main question that from an infrastructure standpoint still has to be answered is, do we have the tools in place to allow the next million gamers to join this Web3 gaming space? And again, I don't think we're there yet. It hasn't been proven at this point, but the signs are positive. And once you've got some momentum behind you, players are going to keep bringing these ideas forward. Oh, we need to do XYZ with a wallet and with the onboarding process to convert from fiat currency into the various tokens that are going to be necessary for the game. Now, all of those elements can be built out over time, but you have to have them in place before you bring traditional gamers to the space.
Yeah, it doesn't work if we're not on a base layer that functions without delays, without issues, without constrictions and sudden just like breakdowns of servers. Things need to be smooth because in Web 2 they are. And we need to be as good as, if not better than Web 2. And the better is really the fact that we're as good as, and we provide ownership, right? If we're like not as good, but we have ownership, then it's a niche product. It's actually then super niche, and like crypto's niche. But like if the game is just super fun and engaging and beautiful graphics and everything's perfect and the layers are smooth and everything is like you can make transactions like you do in any game, right? Like just normally without having to wait 24 hours or whatever. Like maybe for withdrawals, having some 24-hour, like that's not a huge deal. I don't think that's the end of the world. But like within the game, things need to run smoothly, and you don't need to feel like super encumbered by the process. Definitely.
Yep, that's right. So I'd actually draw a parallel comparison to the early 2000s. And you mentioned WoW. I've been a WoW player for almost since launch, not consecutively for the whole time, but for probably 5 or 6 years over the last couple of decades here. I would call attention back to 2005, 6, 7 time period. Blizzard at that time really struggled with server stability. And so you would go through phases where people were trying to get into WoW, and you'd have hundreds of thousands of people all hitting those servers at the same time. You'd have hour-long queues. People would wait for 12 hours to be able to get into the game for enough people to exit so that they could actually launch it. And so if you think back to those early days, what you can't have happen is those same problems that Web 2 solved 15 years ago now getting replicated again on the blockchain. I mean, you can have them, but people aren't willing to stay unless the product is so much better than what they can get in the Web 2 space. And really, that's not the case for any games that are out today. And even I think Illuvium is not going to be able, regardless of how good the product is, if they have inability of people to access it, or they have security issues, or they have challenges onboarding. You can't overcome those in 2022. You could overcome those when you were Blizzard in 2006, and you were the only game in town that was anywhere near that level. So you have to solve those base layer issues before you can actually launch a competitive product.
Yeah, we definitely saw that already, just in like Axie Infinity. I remember when I joined, they were having that where a few weeks everything's good, and then for like a week or two, it's really hard to even get into a game because so many new people are coming, and their servers just haven't been future-proofed because they didn't assume that there would be this much success, right? Whereas I think Illuvium's definitely taken that on board, and I certainly hope that they're like future-proofing any servers that they're going to be launching on to the max, because they're not building this for 10,000, 100,000 players. They're building this for 10 million, 100 million plus players to potentially be flowing in, not just on this game, but in all their future games and more. So we want to take over the world here. And if you don't have future-proofed servers and we're running into that old issue, it's just dumb. It's just too dumb.
Yeah, good luck to you. That's right. Yeah, I think that long-term vision is so critical. You talk about it, and I know Robbie and the IMX team, they talk about bringing the next billion gamers into GameFi, and I think it's the same type of vision that the Warwick clan has when it comes to Illuvium and the product team. They're not talking about how can we scale up to 1 million players. They're talking about how can we get to the point where we're the largest gaming studio in the world. And that vision itself is compelling, but it also requires you to think differently, because you can launch in a very different way if you're trying to scale up to 100,000 players than if you're trying to be able to scale to 100 million players one day.
Yeah, it's a totally different initial framework that you're building, and then you don't have to like do this huge pivot that essentially Axie now has to do, where they built specific I don't actually know how good their new game's going to be, but they've been working on it for a ton of time, and they have way more money than Illuvium ever had to build it, and they've still got like way less people that they've employed, and like they've been at it for ages. For like forever. So it's the other thing that's very difficult to do in not just this space, but like any space, is to be able to spend money really well, in the sense of like, if you've got like tons of money, how do you hire effectively like a huge team that works really well together and can work individually and on their own. Like that's just hard to do, and that's the one thing that the Warwicks. Well, there's many things that the Warwicks do that is just uniquely very, very impressive and them. But that is one thing that they've also definitely done incredibly well, to the point where we're at like 250 people working for them. And that's a nut-sized team for the amount of time that they've had, not to mention for the quality of game they've built. Like that's actually, it's mad that they've accomplished it with what they have. Like it's insane. So yeah, hats off to them, big time. I am wondering, like, have we pretty much covered everything? Is there any other bits that you think we should cover?
Yeah, I think this was a really good overview of the land sale, what's coming up next in the space. What I would say is from a next step standpoint, the really exciting part for me is what this means for the industry as a whole, because this, in my mind, is really the first really almost flawlessly executed mint at scale that you've seen in GameFi, right? And we've had large mints before. I mean, you can look at other projects and Decentraland and some of the others that have had good sales over time, but in general, none of those projects have had a really compelling product yet. And so now you've got the opportunity. The question is, the stage is yours, Illuvium. What are you going to do next? And so that's what I'm looking forward to see. Certainly fingers crossed, and we hope that the team's able to continue to deliver at the same quality. And we'll see where we are 3 or 4 years from now. This may prove to be one of those pivotal moments where, with the success of the land sale, that proved a lot of the scalability that was required to carry off the next steps.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, I think let's bring this to a close, because I don't want to like dilute in any way anything that we've said, or like hash things. Like it's just been a very wonderful conversation, and I think we covered a lot of ground. It's been freaking awesome talking to you, bro.
Thanks, Vet. You too, mate. It's been awesome.
Well, I will definitely be seeing you soon.
Very good. Thanks for all of our audience members. We look forward to seeing you in the Discord servers. Illuvium, I'm in Shiny Shards as a guild, and we look forward to seeing you also now in the Illuvium land spaces.
And all the like needed links, they will be in the description of this video. Take care, guys.
Very good. Take care.